is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Hello and welcome to Killer Innovations. We're live here each and every Sunday on BizTalk Radio Network, 30 stations around the U.S. We also come out as a podcast each and every Tuesday, and I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Today's show, we're going to cover a topic, albeit we talk about it in the intro, but it's one of those areas where we need to, talk a little bit about design work, which we haven't done in the past. And so in this case, talking about the design as in the role of innovation. I did a couple of blog posts here recently on design thinking and really the change in role of design. A lot of times, at least in my history, when I was designing product, you got into the role of design the product and then you throw it over the designers, and it's kind of like, putting lipstick on a pig, wrap it in plastic, make it look nice, versus really thinking about design from an upfront perspective. So today's guest, Seth Taylor. Seth and I have known each other for, I don't know, it's got to be almost 10 years, I'm thinking, something like that.
Yeah,
but today is the first time we've ever met, pseudo face-to-face on a video call here today for today's show. So, Seth, welcome to Killer Innovations.
Thanks, Phil. Glad to be here.
It's been an interesting relationship. Seth was an long time, one of the early listeners of the show when we first started out, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But Seth is a founder of his design firm, which is based up in Provo, Utah. Been doing design for quite some time, and Seth and I bounce back emails every once in a while. But what really prompted me to ask Seth to come on the show today is he went off and he did some work for a high-profile company for a CEO who I happen to know. And he sent me his analysis of a redesign of logo and branding, and asked for my thoughts on it. And I thought, okay, here's a guy who isn't waiting until he gets a client. He's thinking about how do you transform something, and then use that as kind of a spark for that company to think a little bit differently about it. So, Seth, let's back up here a little bit. How did you even get into the design? Is design always something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I might have started as early as my high school days when I got to make posters for a play. Oh, actually, even before that, I had a day camp where we found one of those big old spools that cables wrapped around, that runs from power line to power line. And I made a cool little logo on there, and everyone got excited about it. And I thought, wow, design could be fun. And then from there, went on to posters and onto logos and websites and so forth.
And where did you go to school at?
I started out at Iowa State University. That's where I grew up. This is back in Iowa. And then from there, I went to BYU. And then I studied lettering at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan.
Okay. So hold it. You did your undergrad at BYU in the design group there?
Yes.
Okay. So I got to ask you a question then. Do you happen to know a guy by the name of Mark Solomon?
I don't.
So Mark was head of design for me at HP, graduated BYU. He's now head of design at Pebble.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
So there's a little design mafia that is at BYU. I've quickly found out through Mark Solomon and all the designers he's introduced me to that are all from BYU. So I didn't realize you were a BYU grad. So you're part of the BYU mafia then. And actually, it's a heck of a program at HP. We got really excited. We actually, for a couple of years, we actually did intern projects, that type of thing for BYU students on the design side. It's a heck of a program.
It was great when I went there too. I really loved it.
And so you get done, you got to school. What's next for you then? What'd you do?
From there, I went to a marketing firm for real estate, surprisingly. And then from there, I jumped from marketing into design agency life, and ended up being a creative director for several years. Worked up my way from designer, art director, creative director. And then I decided I think I can do this on my own, and started my own agency called Stotion.
So when did you found Stotion?
2 years ago.
2 years?
Yeah,
So hold it. So
great.
when you and I first got to know each other through the show, you were not at Stotion, and you were working for other firms.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So let's back up here. So I want to bring people in a little bit on the story of how you and I met. So way back, like I said, it's probably got to be. It wasn't like right at the beginning of the show, but it wasn't too far after the show got started. Seth sends me this random email because in the early days of podcasting, this is, let's keep in this is pre-iTunes. This was pre. The iPhone hadn't even been invented yet when this show started. But there was a tool that existed on the Mac where you could encode shows and actually then do chapter markings. And so Seth sends me an email just purely out of the blue recommending that I ought to consider making these chapter markings. Because back then we primarily had 3 segments to the show. The last segment was always the killer question. The second segment was kind of weak signals, and the first segment was whatever topic I wanted to, spout off on any given time. And I pointed out, reminding Seth that I worked at HP, and so therefore me doing anything on a Mac, the odds of that happening was going to be like 0.
Yeah.
Right. Even to this day, my kids do not buy anything that's an Apple-related product without asking me first to make sure it's okay, even though I'm no longer at HP. And I turned it around and I said, well, that's great. How about you doing it? And Seth's like, okay, sure. So Seth ended up there for a long period of time, took every show from the Killer Innovations archive each week as we did the show and go in and put in the chapter markings, and then would re-upload it, and we actually created 2 different RSS feeds. So you can get a Mac feed or a straight MP3 feed, depending on if you want the chapter markings or whatever. So did I get the story right, or did I forget anything?
No, you got it perfect. Yeah. Good job.
So that's how Seth and I met, was really him. And I have to say, he's the only guy. And like I said, the first time I've met him face to face is today as part of this show. But he's the only person I've ever given my login credentials to Libsyn, which is the full digital archive of the show going back 12 years. And so Seth had his own. We could log into Libsyn, grab the audio file, do his thing, and then upload the new file for the Apple version of the audio files. So
now I feel even more privileged.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that it was that exclusive. So
let's back up a little bit on the show. Even how did you find the show originally? Do you remember?
I think good question. I'm trying to remember what caused that. Yeah, I think it was in a featured list on iTunes or something like that. It was a kind of up and coming sort of podcast, and I checked it out.
Yeah, this is pre-iTunes, so this would have been like Odeo or one of those guys.
Yeah, thank you.
It was one of the early podcasts. Here's a trivia question. You know what Odeo became? Because Odeo was the big guys out there with podcast lists in the early days.
No idea.
You know what Odeo became?
What's that?
Odeo is now Twitter.
Oh my word!
The guys who, and I was like the first 10 shows to ever load up on Odeo. So all the guys that were on Odeo got crushed when the iTunes came out, and they pivoted the business to Twitter, and they became Twitter.
I think I might have been listening to another podcast on Odeo, and there was like a related podcast, and it was yours, and I've been hooked. It's good content.
Yeah, so those were some of the early days when everybody had the podcast list out. So those were some of the crazy days. And so when we come back, though, we're going to take this quick commercial break here. And when we come back, what I want to talk about is this, this project thing that you kind of got started on here recently about this design work that you did, and what led you up to really even thinking about looking at somebody who's not even one of your clients and going out and striking out to go do and create even So you invest that kind of time and invest that kind of energy, because I think it also talks to, in some cases, what innovators need to do. It's not wait until you got the work. Do the work ahead of time. Put the thinking behind it ahead of time. And so we're going to come back after this quick commercial break. We got to pay some bills. But when we come back, we're going to pick up our conversation with Seth, continuing the conversation on design thinking, and the role of design in innovation and in products, and we'll also talk about some user experience stuff also. So stay right there. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network, and we'll be right back after just these quick commercial breaks. Thanks.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We're continuing in our discussion with Seth Taylor, who's the founder and CEO for Stotion. Seth, longtime listener of the podcast. I consider you a friend, even though today's the first time we've met face to face, because everything else has always been by email. Now, in the case of the work that you've done over your career, it's covered kind of a wide range of areas of design, whether it be design or experiences. Is there one area of design that you really find something that you really just love and are passionate about?
But I sure do love working with letters. It tends to be something, if you bring it up at a party, puts people to sleep pretty fast. You start talking about fonts.
Yeah, you're talking about kerning on typography, and the eyes glaze over, right?
Yeah. And the next question usually is, so are there fonts that people pay for? It's like, oh, okay, got it. I understand the conversation here. It's like, well, yes, I really love lettering, love working on logos. And then right on the tail, that is the overall experience, whether it be in apps or on a website. I just really enjoy being able to work through those challenges that are faced with new features and making sure that they're nice and easy to use.
So in the case of typography, I think people kind of overlook how important typography is, right? From the standpoint of readability, the ability to denote or people's emotions. People don't even realize that, the emotional byproduct of typography that it can have. There's certain fonts that can either elicit a, love or anger or, excitement or relaxation. It's amazing how much typography really plays in that role.
Yeah, and the subtleties are really interesting as well. You can have some sort of musical composition. You can play it on the piano, and it can be the exact same notes as a beginner person who's playing that piano, or it can sound really masterful with the person who's well practiced at it. And it's ends up happening with fonts as well. You can just type in A, B, C, D, and that's great. But there's ways to have really finesse letters and really finesse logo types.
Yeah, it's interesting. My original major was architecture.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I tend to be more graphically oriented than a lot of people in my role. So therefore, the design role has always been an important, role for me. Like we shared earlier about, Mark Solomon and, Glenn Wong was part of that team. That was part of my design team at HP, and Stacy Wolf, who's still there, runs laptop design and mobile product design for HP Inc. The team he manages is phenomenal. But it was a tough challenge at a company even like HP, which is very hardware oriented, to bring design in up front rather than waiting until the product is designed and then it's wrap it in plastic and make it pretty type of a role. Is that pretty universal now? I mean, we always talk about design thinking now and how important design is even as early in the innovation process. But you work with a lot of clients. Do they get it, or are you still running into clients where the design is at the tail end of the process?
Yeah, it depends on how we've worked with the clients or how they've been referred to us. Some people will say, yeah, make sure to come work with Stoshin. They're going to be great with making it look really good. And then other companies have referred us by saying ask them questions like before you fully invest in what the features are going to be. Go ahead and start talking about what it needs to accomplish. And it's something where the trend has definitely changed in the past 5-10 years, where it's not just lipstick on a pig anymore. It's something that's working together to make sure that the job is done well.
Well, okay, I normally don't tout Apple, but I'll tout Apple. Right?
Careful.
But it's hard not to, right? I mean, look,
Yeah.
Steve and I had a chance to know each other for our sons. We knew each other both work related, but more time really because of the commonality of our two boys and the sports they were in. But you cannot deny, Johnny Ives and Steve and the whole team at Apple of embracing design, not even as a kind of the outside look, but the overall experience piece.
Yeah, it seems that design is something that lowers the barriers of resistance in a lot of ways, where something can feel good, not just look good. It seems to go past where the eyeballs just rest on it. It's something that's truly enjoyable.
Yeah, well, and I think you could attribute, I think, some good portion of Apple's market capitalization to the quality of the design. It's not just the product, but it's how deeply you think about the role of design and not just the user interface, but the entire user experience, and not just the user experience of the product, but the shopping experience, the opening of the box experience, that vacuum pull that you get when you're trying to separate the lid from, it's like the iPhone's holding onto the lid and saying, no, don't open my box yet. It elicits all those emotional responses.
Something that's a nice reveal, right? It's something that the opening is now paced instead of just immediate snap. There's sometimes when things have a transition like that, it builds anticipation and a little bit more excitement for the reveal of the product.
Yeah. Well, even at HP, we had, these great designers, and these designers always wanted to set up these great reveals. I remember they black foamed an entire conference room, including the ceilings and everything, to try to get the light, just right. So when the light hit this product, it would just give off this kind of. Now I got it. The rest of the HP executives didn't get it at all as to why why there was so much energy being put into this reveal.
It seems like that's been something that's transitioned to, is how more executives are valuing that, to say, but can we use design to pull people in, to attract people to our product?
Yeah, and I think the consumers are just becoming much more sophisticated about it.
And
the days of where you could, where you just did it, and you just pushed it, through a traditional advertising model versus, really eliciting that passion for your product or passion for your company.
Yeah, where the commodity transitions into a luxury feel, like something that's elite and exciting.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting challenge, right, for companies, and some companies that don't have a product, right? So there's some that, don't have the traditional, like a physical object, some shiny thing, but they still want the design in that user experience. So when we come back, I know you've worked with some of your clients even on those areas, which are not just tangible product things with regards to that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that when we come back from this commercial break. So stay right where you're at. Yeah, we're going to come back. We're going to pick up this conversation on design thinking, but not design just from the standpoint of products, but design from even for companies and services that are not truly product related. So stay right there. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are a show about creativity, innovation, and design. And today's topic is all about design. We're talking with Seth Taylor, founder and CEO for Stotion, a design agency based in Provo, Utah, doing a lot of work with a lot of different kinds of clients. And as we were going into the commercial break, we were talking about, my experience and your experience of, how important design has become for companies that really get it. But a lot of times people think about design as really just being that gets applied to physical products, a smartphone, a PC, a printer, or whatever it is. But design isn't just about the physical. It is about this emotional. It's about this experience. So, Seth, talk to us a little bit about your experience with your clients on those that don't do physical product and what that role of design looks like. Is it different? Is it the same? Is it just, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so we've noticed with a lot of our clients, we mentioned not having a physical product. We do a lot of interactive projects, whether it be for these big insurance companies who have thousands of brokers that work for them. And when we attack some of those challenges that they have, as you may know, there's lots of jargon that comes around with insurance, and it can be kind of a nightmare to navigate through. And so we want to make sure that when we're building those interfaces, that we first think about who's going to be using this piece of software. And if we can make it so everyone can use the software, that's great. But if we can make sure that the people who are the experts and need to have these really, really special tools and special reports, if we can make it fast for them on their side of things, then we can make sure that everyone has a good experience overall. And it's something that where software isn't the physical product, you can iterate so quickly. You can test so many different options before you push the product out live to the market. So
what's kind of that process look like? Is it, rapid prototyping, minimal viable product? What kind of approaches? Because I know it from a product design perspective, but when you're trying to build a new product, but from an experience design, is it the same process or do you do something different?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the early lessons I learned from you. Also, being a designer, you always want to make it look really pretty, right? But one of the lessons I learned from you in an early podcast was to rapid prototype and to say, okay, how can we make this rough and complete enough that you can test it, right? How rough can that be? And that's something that we've implemented in our studio in lots of different ways, where we can do something as simple as a wireframe, and by wireframe I mean just a bunch of gray boxes essentially that can explain what the feature is, and then we can go out and test that. We can, whether it be internally or inviting in beta testers to run through things. That's something that's been really important to us, because we got to get the experience right, and then we can get the polish to look good. Without having that core foundation of it working well, then I don't care how good it looks. It's just gotta function well, and then it can be beautiful.
And do the clients get it, or are they looking for? Yeah,
every time it's something that it gets a return on investment really quickly when you see something working well, and their clients or their customers, when it's working well and everything's flowing quickly, that gets them really excited. They're like, wow, what used to be really confusing is now something that's an easy thing to use, and even makes people smile while they're using it, because we tend to use fun phrasing in some of our call to actions and other things like that. So we like to make them smile, even though they're doing insurance sometimes.
Well, insurance is just one example of industries that you're working with. What are some of the other projects that you've worked on? Don't need to name clients if you don't want to, but
sure.
kind of the areas that you've worked across, because you've covered a pretty wide swath of clients.
Yeah, we have. We're working on brainstorming an amusement park right now. Some of the activities that you can experience there. Let's see, what else are we doing? Doing some work for Dish, making sure that recruits have all the tools and training that they need. My mind's going blank at the moment, but some of the active projects are really exciting.
And then one of the projects that you did without actually having a client, which caused us to get reconnected, was the work that you did on, I don't know if it was out of just frustration or something was so ugly it was driving you crazy, but the redesign work you did on Tesla.
Oh yeah,
As
the
far as
SpaceX project.
Elon Musk's company, and then you sent it to me to ask for my feedback, and then to see
Oh, for SpaceX.
if I would send it over to Elon and see if Elon would respond to that. So give me a little background. What was the itch you were scratching when you did the redesign of Tesla?
Yes. So I think you're talking about the SpaceX
Or
work,
SpaceX.
probably?
It was SpaceX.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Tesla could use some help too. Might as well. I could say that. But when I was looking at SpaceX, I think a lot of us here on this planet have been really excited about some of the work that SpaceX is accomplishing. And then when I looked close at the logo type specifically, I saw some issues that for me were rather glaring. And so I went through, scrutinized every curve and said, okay, I don't need to overhaul the logo, right? Most of the time we want to preserve as much equity as possible in any given logo. But now let's make sure that the curves can be just really attractive. And I was noticing where there's some gaps in some of the letters and other things like that. So I assume that's what you're referring to, is that step-by-step process there.
Yeah, what was interesting was how complete the thinking that you laid out as to why the change, right? It wasn't just like, here's the old one and here's what your new one should look like. Because in this case, you actually laid it out exactly, each part of the logo and why you would change it, and then leading to ultimately, so someone, even somebody who doesn't have a typography background or a logo design background can follow through exactly to see how you got to the end design. So I have to say, it was probably one of the most complete packets I've ever seen.
Thank you.
From that perspective. So kudos to you for that. And by the way, it did go off to Elon. Now, Elon has not replied back to me. Elon is known for going dark, and I don't know what, if anything, or if his team will, filter it out before it gets to him or whatever. But I do have to say, I was, quite impressed with the work.
Thank you. It's one of those things where it's important for me to have it work well, and there was reasoning behind the changes. It wasn't just a surface level, like we've mentioned before, the lipstick on the pig, so to say.
Right.
Just to feel right and be something that's strong for them.
Yeah, but I think again, what impressed me was you actually did walk through the logic as to why the change, not just that, okay, this needed to be closer, or you didn't need this little, lip on it, but why you didn't need the lip, the visual aesthetic, the power of the logo at the end, because of the being kind of cleaned up and, more of a kind of it had a foundation and a framework and an architecture to the overall design, not just a bunch of letters. So yeah, I have to say I was quite impressed. Impressed.
Very kind of you.
And we'll see. You have to let me know, because I gave your contact information is in the document in the email I sent to Elon. But nice. I also wouldn't be, in your case, I wouldn't even be disappointed. Have you posted that anywhere, by the way?
I need to put up the PDF because that walks you through everything. I did end up putting a link to some of the lettering and some of the thinking on my website.
Yeah, no, you ought to do a blog post on it or whatever. Maybe do a guest post, for for the site. I'd be more than willing to host it as a guest post, to talk about design and design innovation, because I think it's that, you did great work. It was really good.
Well,
and I think people would be interested in it because, like you said, SpaceX is kind of reignited the imagination.
I love it. Yeah.
For people. And, Elon is incredibly smart. I've done, I don't know, a dozen meetings with him one-on-one over the years, primarily most of the time when I was at HP. And, he's the closest thing we have to Thomas Edison.
Wow. Yeah.
In today's world. So, we want that guy. So, so stay right there. When we get back, we're going to take a quick commercial break here. But when we come back, I've got some questions. I'm going to put Seth a little bit under the spotlight here, given that he's been a long-time listener of the podcast. And there's a number of things that we're thinking about here for the show. And, and I every once in a while, I'll send a survey out to a core group of followers of the show to get their feedback. But we're going to do this live on the show. So if you're listening to this, you'll be able to actually post your comments in the bottom of the show notes. I want to hear your feedback too. When we come back, I'm going to pop some crazy ideas on Seth, get his feedback since he's one of the longtime listeners. And we're going to do a little ad hoc brainstorming right here live on national radio. So stay right there. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. We're going to pay a few bills. And then we'll be right back. If you're on Facebook Live, go ahead and post your questions, and we'll answer those during the commercial breaks. With that, stay right there. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
BizTalkRadio.com.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations, a show about creativity and innovation and design. Before we jump back, though, into our topic, we need to take just a moment here and thank our sponsor. Now, if you've been a long-time listener, you're all saying, well, hold on here. You've never had a sponsor in 12 years. And yeah, you're right. I've just never been one. The show's never been really about the commercial side for me as far as, money maker. It's really about my method of paying it forward. But one of the common questions I get from a lot of innovators is where do they find good talent? How do they go out and, maybe they got the spark of an idea, but they don't know how to actually take that idea and turn it into a product or service. And, could I recommend somebody? Now, we've all tried those outsourcing sites, and I don't know about you, but they just never worked well for me. And, whatever I get as a deliverable is always somehow some kind of a disappointment. Today's sponsor for this show is TopTal. Now, I've gotten to know TopTal. I've gotten to know the CEO. Actually, I had him on the podcast months ago, and that started the conversation, the relationship. TopTal's different in the fact that they go off and they interview and screen every engineer. They also have design talent. And less than 3% of the people that apply ever get accepted. And companies that use them are big guys like Pfizer, JP Morgan, all the way down to startup companies like Airbnb and Zendesk. And in fact, a lot of the startups at incubators like Y Combinator and others, Techstars, the engineering teams are really TopTal engineers. So TopTal's offering a special offer for the listeners of the Killer Innovation Show. You can go over there, go over to toptal.com/Phil. You can start your project. And if after the first 2 weeks you don't think they're just absolutely killing it, you get 100% of your money back. But even more importantly is you get to keep all the deliverables. Now, the reason I've taken on the sponsors is to help with putting more money into the two nonprofits that I'm actively involved in. Pioneer Education, which is schools in Africa, and then Hacking Autism, helping those people on the autism spectrum with jobs, technologies, and therapy. So TopTal money coming in is actually going through to the nonprofits to help fund those nonprofits. So I do appreciate the support that TopTal is giving us and giving the nonprofits. So hop on over to toptal.com/Phil. Take advantage of the program. Go ahead and get that project started. Try them out. You'll love it. Trust me. So, Seth, you've been a long-time listener of the show, and I kind of gave you a little bit of warning as we came out of the last segment that I was going to pop you some questions. 12 years of the show, in fact, during the commercial break, you asked what prompted me to kind of get back into a regular schedule of the podcast. In the first year of the podcast, we did 50 shows in 52 weeks with me traveling all over the place. And then as I became CTO at HP, the work schedule just got to be crazy. But over the last couple of years, and then last June, I got approached by Scott Miller and the team at BizTalk Radio to think about doing it as a nationally syndicated show. We started that July 5th. Now, being nationally syndicated, that kind of forces the schedule because you're live. If I'm not in this chair, it's dead air to 30 radio stations around the country. So it kind of forced the discipline. But I've also been sitting back and kind of rethinking the show. So first question out, because you've listened through the entire migration of the show. For probably the first 7 or 8 years, it was predominantly just me talking about my experiences, things I've seen or dealt with, or challenges like bosses not getting it or whatever. And then probably over the last 7 years or so, 6 or 7 years, it's been, more guests, bringing people in from a variety of industries. So which do you like better? Do you like the old shows when it was just me, or do you like the new shows with the guest, or do you think it should be some kind of a mix in between?
So I've really enjoyed even going back to some of the older podcasts and recordings, because there's a really great deliberate script and so much value in all of those. I've also, I guess, even right now, I'm benefiting from being able to experience this on this side too. But I think the variety of bringing in other expertise and other viewpoints, similar to as we were talking before about the neural diversity, I think that's a great benefit to the show. So I don't mean to speak out of both sides there, but I think the tight content that you had before was really good, and hearing from others too on their thoughts and their innovations is really helpful.
Yeah, you're right. Because one of the things that I've heard from feedback from some of the listeners so far is they like the guests, but they would like to have it kind of intermixed, where there might be a guest for 2 or 3 weeks, and then maybe some shows on specific areas, kind of almost show types.
Yeah.
So another question, and this one has come up every year in the 12 years of the show, and that is the name of the show.
Yeah.
Right? I get emails every year of people trying to persuade me to change the name from Killer, not to use the word killer, in Killer Innovations. So I'm gonna open it up to you. You're a logo designer, you're a brand guy, you're a design guy.
Well, I love the reasoning behind it. And I think that your story is compelling where you, if people are asking about it or even suggest changing it, I think you can almost refer them to some of your content to say, well, the goal is to make something that's hard, like an innovation where it's a buzzword and something that you hear all the time. But your goal is to help people figure out how they can make it killer, how they can make it something that's hard for your competition to even catch up with. And I think that's strong, and it stands out in the industry. I think they're, name is a name. I've experienced my own challenges with my own name, but you're well aware of some of those. But I really like it. I think it's something that stands out. And I think
well, the interesting little challenge is there's a group of guys in Seattle who have created a gun company called Killer Innovations.
Oh shoot! Yeah,
and it's Killer-Innovations. And so I run into those guys every once in a while, albeit I kind of dominate the SEO on the word Killer Innovations, so they don't get much search love in the process. But hey, Seth, I want to appreciate you taking the time to come out on the show. We're going to wrap it up here. So if people want to follow how to get a hold of you, where can they find you? Is it Stoshin then is the best place to find you?
Yeah, Stoshin.com.
Okay, so I'll put the links into the show notes. So hop on over to killinnovations.com. We'll have the show notes up. Podcast always comes out on Tuesday morning, so you can reach out and find Seth or hire Stoshin to do your next design project. And with that, we will be back here next Sunday here at Kill Innovations, and we're always live also on Facebook Live. So with that, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you real soon.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. biztalkradio.com.